anywhere.
And that is Stitch Pink Block 7.
Okay, hi, we're back again for block 7 of the Stitch Pink Sew Along. It's called Jersey Girl. This one has a Dresden plate. So you want to download your pattern. We have it linked on our Facebook page. You can also, if you haven't done it yet, go to Moda's blog at my.modafabrics.com and get it. This one has 3 pages. And it's very important whenever you print this out that you make sure this measures 1 inch on your printer. If it doesn't, you're going to have to enlarge it just a little bit if it's too small, or you're going to have to shrink it a little bit if it's too large, because if you're going to use this template, you want that to be exactly the same. If you don't want to use the template, you can also use the Easy Dresden template.
Ruler.
Yes, ruler, sorry. Template ruler, because we're going to be making these Dresden plates today, and we're going to they're easier to cut whenever you use that. So you can use this template if you can get this to come out to 1 inch, or you can use this Easy Dresden template ruler. And there's another thing I want to explain to you about the pattern. When you're cutting out your parts, you just have 3 different parts to cut out. However, on B, you use 3 different grunges, and it says 5 each of 365, 64, 10, 328. There are only 3 colors you're going to be using because we do not have a color that's 10. We're going to be making 5 each of 365 and 64 and 10 of 328. So we have 5 of 365, 5 of 64, and then this one we're going to have 10 of these pieces.
Okay, a little confusing.
So we'll come back and show you how to make those Dresden blades.
Okay.
Okay, if you're going to use the paper, the pattern on the paper as your Dresden to cut it out, what you want to do is copy this onto cardstock and then cut it out. And if nothing else, you can draw it on here, and then you can even use a ruler to cut after you've drawn it on there. You have to cut it like that. Or, like I said before, you can use the Easy Dresden ruler. And what you'll do is just line up the bottom edge and the 4.5 inch line at the top. Then you just cut down each side. And then you get your little wedge. Then what you want to do is fold it in half.
Right sides together?
Right sides together with the long end. So that, I guess, is the top. That is the top. You want to fold the long end together right in the middle, and then you're going to sew 1/4 inch. You need to backstitch the beginning and the end so your stitches stay in.
So you're sewing across the wide end of that wedge.
You're sewing across the wide end just like this, and then you're going to cut a little angle on the side where the fold is.
Show that to me a little bit better. Oh yeah, okay.
Okay, so then what you want to do is flip this out. And when you do that, you want to press your seam open, or just kind of finger press it open. And whenever you've cut that little slit in there, that helps you be able to do that. And then with the Easy Dresden ruler, there's the little bamboo tool that comes with it, so you can help poke your point out. Then after you get it all poked out, and you want to kind of get it to the middle, you'll press that down.
So the seam is in the center of the blade?
So the seam goes in the center of the blade, and it makes your point right there. So I've got these other ones already pressed.
Oh, those are so cute.
They are cute, aren't they? So then the next thing you'll do is start putting them together. Let me move this out of the way. Start putting them together, and you'll use the pattern. Really, there are 10 of this pink color, so you really want a pink color between each red one. And I just laid them out just like I had here. So you lay them out, you sew them together in 4 sections of 5 blades each. So I just looked at the colors on this one, and so I sewed this section like that, and then the next one had the reds on the outside, but every other one is that darker pink So this one was here. This one was here. This one goes right here. And then when I sew these together, it'll go right here. Then what you want to do is sew these two sections together. Sew these two sections together. And then once you do that, you sew them all together.
So you kind of get a half circle on each side,
Right.
and then sew the half
two
circles.
half circles. You start with 4 quadrants. And then you sew these two together, these together. So you have 2 halves. Then you're going to sew your 2 halves together. And you can either press them all to one side or you can press them all open.
Okay.
Whatever you prefer.
All right.
And I'll come right back after I get this all sewn together and show you what you do next.
All right.
Okay, I have all my blades sewn together. Now, I did not tell you something that I probably should have. When you're sewing these together, start at the top of the blade and go down to the inside. And you will see that the bottom of the blades maybe didn't all come down to the exact same place, but that's okay because we're going to cover that up. So the next thing we need to do is make the circle. Because
how do you decide where to put that on that block?
Okay, it said to space it out where you have at least 1/4 inch around, from the outside edge.
Okay.
And you can fold it in 4ths and get a crease. I'll show you what I'm talking about.
I was hoping you'd do that.
Close the blade.
No, fold it in 4ths.
Fold it in 4ths.
And close the blade.
And close the blade before I cut my finger with it.
Yeah.
All right, so now I have these lines. I can just line these blades up right on that. So I have, there's a point, there's a line.
Okay.
So now it's kind of laying that way. I was worried that my circle wouldn't lay flat once I was finished. If that happens to you and it wants to kind of come up a little bit, you can try pressing it. If that doesn't work, just take a little bit bigger seam on some of your blades, and then that'll take some of that
fullness.
Yes, thank you. Some of that fullness out, so lay down a little bit flatter. But I was happy with the way it turned out.
So if you have a wobbly wheel, that's how to fix it.
Yes.
Your wheel looks pretty
Fix
good.
your wobbly wheel. All right, so there are a few things that you can do to make the center circle. You can use some freezer paper, turn the edges under, pop it off. I chose to use the Lori Holt method where I traced the circle that was on my pattern, not the sewing, not the seam allowance part, but the actual inside part. I traced that onto sew-in interfacing. I put it to the right side of my fabric. I sewed right on that line. You can see my line still. I sewed around it, and then I trimmed it off to about 1/4 to 1/8 of an inch. It's a little bit less than 1/4 of an inch. Then I cut it, I pulled it apart, and I cut an X in the interfacing. Now I'm going to turn the right sides out. I'm going to use my point-to-point turner. Get the edges all out. And it's not as hard to do with the bigger circles as it is with the smaller ones. And whenever I sew this, I go very slow. I pivot a lot, so I don't just sew all the way around without lifting my foot up and pivoting a little bit. Also like 3 or 4 stitches, and then I'll pivot.
And if your needle can be stopped in the down position, that makes it even better.
It does make it better. Okay, so that's fairly flat. I would probably press it, and then you're going to cover that up. Now, there are also a few different ways you can actually applique it down, stitch it down. They say you can use a decorative stitch. You can do it by hand and do a hidden stitch. Like whenever I do the Lori Holt applique, I use a hidden stitch and just baste it down.
Kind of the same stitch as when you do the hand
binding
part on the binding.
Right.
Yeah.
So when I hand sew my binding, it's the same stitch. I'll just either match my fabric to the thread to the fabric, or I'll use Invisifill thread where it just kind of blends in and you don't see it.
Yeah,
There's another way.
It's 100-weight thread, and it's really fine.
There's another way you can do it. Is they say use a decorative stitch and just top stitch along the outside edge. You can use like, I was thinking maybe a dark pink would look pretty, just a top stitch. And you can also do it around the circle. To get it down where I want it to be, I can either use Roxanne's glue baste it and just put a little, I'll show you, I'll just do a little bit like that. So I just lift it up a little bit and put some glue. I don't want to go right along. I'm going to actually sew this by hand. So I don't want to go right on the edge. And I can just use my applique tip and just run it right under there. I'll press that down a little bit.
Doesn't take long, does it?
Does not. And when I get finished, I'll lay something heavy on it for just a little bit. Or you can use a glue pen. And just glue baste it down.
And that one's made by Sew Line, right?
Right. I would much rather glue baste it down than use pins, because when I'm sewing it down, I don't want my thread getting stuck on those pins. I really like the glue baste it, so I'm just going to go ahead and do that. So I go all the way around there. I'd even do it on the circle, and I'm just going to pick the circle up and just go around. Got stuck on the interfacing there. Well, then I just put my thumb right in it. So that's great.
Okay, so then after you hand stitch that one, is that block done?
When I hand stitch this one, this block will be finished. And like I said, feel free to use your sewing machine, and you can do a blanket stitch. You can do, like they said, a decorative stitch. You could just do a straight stitch.
Kind of edge stitch it. Yep.
Do a tiny little zigzag. You can use invisible thread or, match it. So those are your options on appliquing that down. There's one other block that we're going to be appliquing. So you can kind of try, more than one method if you'd like.
Okay.
But pretty much that's it. And it's going to stay. It's not going to go anywhere.
And that is stitch pink block 7.